Francois is an accountant at a rubber factory. In the annual team photo, Francois is the only one who doesn't fit in the frame. But this no one cares. The head of the HR department, Felix, quietly tells his colleagues that Francois is a bore and that he will soon be fired. Francois overhears this and, with his head down, goes to his office. The chief accountant, Mademoiselle Bertrand, tells his assistant that Francois is hardworking and modest, and she would not like to see him fired. However, for the assistant, the main thing is that she was not fired, and she considers Francois to be nondescript and boring. Maybe that's why he is unlucky. Francois calls his ex-wife Christine, but she, like their son, does not really want to pick up the phone. Then Francois leaves her a message that he is being fired, but he is going to immediately look for a new job in order to continue paying alimony without delays. At home, he listens to Christine's answer. She has no doubt that Francois will find a way to pay alimony. She also asks Francois not to call her back today, because she has plans in the evening. Francois feels very sad because he has no one to talk today to. The only way out he finds at this moment is to jump off the balcony. There he suddenly sees a small kitten. Francois goes to the refrigerator because he cannot go out the window, leaving the cat hungry. Francois pours a plate of milk and is getting ready to jump when suddenly he hears the voice of a neighbor who recently moved into the apartment next door. Jean-Pierre asks him not to jump because yesterday he parked his old car right under Francois' balcony, and the roof is the only thing left intact. When Francois begins to think of another way to commit suicide, the neighbor knocks on the door and asks for his kitten back. Then Jean-Pierre puts his foot in the doorway and admits that he doesn't have a car and the kitten isn't his, but he had to lie to get Francois to open the door. Jean-Pierre says that he can't leave until they both have a drink. Francois admits that his life has stopped being interesting. 2 years ago, his wife with his son left, and all that only he had in his life was the factory where he worked for 20 years. But today Francois heard about his dismissal, and from Felix, who didn't hide his joy at this news. Francois says that he has had a strained relationship with Fat Felix for a long time. Felix coaches the factory rugby team, and one day he insisted that Francois should play with them and then broke the accountant's collarbone. Francois had to spend 3 weeks in the hospital, and Felix joked all this time about how useless Francois is for the factory. Jean-Pierre used to work as a psychologist at the factory, so he has an idea how Francois can keep his job as an accountant. Francois must pretend to be gay, and then the management will be afraid to fire a representative of sexual minorities. Francois says that he is not an actor, so he will not be able to play this role truthfully. But Jean-Pierre reassures the accountant, because he will not need to pretend to be gay. Francois remains himself, continuing to hide his personal life and his secret to be found out by the management as if by accident. Using computer graphics, Jean-Pierre superimposes Francois' face on a stranger from a gay club and anonymously sends a letter to the factory management. The next day, the director calls together the heads of departments and shows these photos. The deputy says that since the main product of the factory is condoms, the favorable attitude of the gay community is very important to it, and it is necessary to keep Francois in his position, so as not to be accused of homophobia. Felix laughs. He suspected that something was wrong with the accountant, because Francois couldn't even put on his socks correctly before the rugby game. The director doesn't see anything funny here and shames Felix for such a statement, because it's the 21st century and ignoring gay rights is stupid and also dangerous for business. The director does not fire Francois from the factory and demands that his deputies not interfere in the accountant's personal life. After the meeting, 2 deputies want to make fun of Felix for his intolerance. They say that Felix's career as well as his position are now in great question and advise him to become friends with Francois, or better yet, invite him to have lunch together. Felix is outraged and disgusted to even imagine such a thing, but he agrees because he is afraid of losing his job. In the canteen, Francois, as always, is having lunch alone, when suddenly Felix comes up to him and awkwardly invites him to have lunch together next time at the restaurant across the street. In the evening, Jean-Pierre hears good news from a joyful Francois. He was not fired. Jean-Pierre smiles and says how quickly views in society change. 20 years ago he was fired for the same reason for which Francois was able to keep his job today. The next day, Felix and Francois have lunch together. Later, the deputy learns from Felix that he had difficulty finding at least one topic of conversation, and Francois was withdrawn and did not talk about his personal life. The deputy says that Felix was not sincere enough, and to fix the situation, he will need to give something to the accountant for St. Francois' Day, which is this Thursday. Felix, without any hesitation, directly states that he will not give gifts to faggots, but suddenly notices that he said it too loudly. Now he has no choice. Days pass, and rumors about Francois' orientation become more widespread. Someone saw him near a gay club, and one woman noticed the accountant's car near the school, and now suspects him of having relations with minors. The chief accountant, Mademoiselle Bertrand, does not believe that Francois is gay and looks at the photos again. There, she notices a tattoo on Francois' shoulder and tells the assistant that this is most likely a photo montage. Francois doesn't seem to have a tattoo on his shoulder, and then the assistant suggests pouring coffee on the accountant so that he takes off his shirt. Deliberately bumping into Francois, the assistant spills coffee on herself. Then Mademoiselle Bertrand suggests Francois stay at the office later today to finish the quarterly report, and then she orders dinner and wine for two. Having drunk heavily, Francois falls asleep, and then Bertrand unbuttons his shirt to see his shoulder, when suddenly a security guard enters the office. Francois wakes up and hurries out of the factory. In the evening, Francois tells Jean-Pierre what happened. He is surprised how such a woman could like him. Jean-Pierre is sure that this is something else. Bertrand wanted to provoke Francois and then publicly expose him in a lie, and therefore it is necessary to urgently strike back. In the morning, Francois informs the director that Bertrand is harassing him and interfering with his work. Later, Bertrand gets a reprimand from the director and blames Francois for it, of course. In the office, Bertrand glares at him and Francois goes out into the hallway to get some air, when suddenly Felix calls him with a large bag in his hands. He gives Francois a pink sweater and congratulates him on his name day. Felix didn't throw away the check, so later at home, his wife scolds him, suspecting infidelity, because a pink sweater for 600 francs is too expensive for a colleague, and a strange gift for a man. Meanwhile, Mademoiselle Bertrand's assistant persuades two thug factory workers to beat up Francois because being gay is disgusting. The thugs put on masks and attack Francois in the parking lot. After that, he barely finds the strength to walk home. After some time, the director invites Francois to take part in a gay parade on behalf of their factory. Francois doesn't like this idea, but the director leaves him no choice, because there is no one else to do it except Francois. In the dining room, Felix sits alone, his gaze empty because his wife left him. When Francois comes in for lunch, Felix sits down next to him and says that he is now lonely, so he offers the accountant to live together. Surprised, Francois refuses, and then Felix, in the presence of colleagues, attacks the accountant with his fists. Felix is taken to a medical center, where he is diagnosed with a nervous breakdown and is then hospitalized. Later, Francois takes part in a gay parade, and not just on foot, but on a large platform that the factory specially built for him. His son unexpectedly sees him on TV and cannot believe it. His father is not a boring gray man. The next day, the son comes to have dinner with Francois and later, satisfied, returns home to his mother. She immediately calls Francois and demands an explanation of why her ex-husband is suddenly gay. The son hears this and demands that his mother leave the father alone, because he has finally found himself. Later, Francois comes to thank Jean-Pierre because more interesting things have happened to him in the last weeks than in his entire life. Francois notices that his neighbor is sad and Jean-Pierre says that his cat has disappeared. Francois promises to find the cat even if he has to climb all the roofs in their neighborhood. A week later, the director wants to promote Francois to chief accountant because after the gay parade, condom sales at their factory have skyrocketed. Bertrand is the first to find out about this because now she is threatened with demotion, so she gets angry and tells Francois that his harassment trick worked. Then Francois goes to the director's office and says that Bertrand is a good manager and it is unfair to treat her like this. Francois is ready to quit himself if only Bertrand would continue working in her previous position. Returning to the accounting department, Francois reports that no one will be demoted or fired. Japanese partners come to the factory and the director organizes a party for the employees. After the celebration, Francois is left alone in the workshop. He thinks about how tomorrow will go for him because Christine called him and offered to meet. Suddenly, Bertrand, who also stayed late, calls him. She admits that for all 6 years of working together, she did not notice a man in Francois. His last actions, such as the trick with gay photos or keeping the position for Bertrand, reveal the new Francois, the one who has a sharp mind, a developed imagination and is able to emerge victorious in any circumstances. Bertrand kisses him and asks if Francois has a condom. Then he looks around and finds one. They have sex, not noticing that at that moment the director brought the Japanese partners on a tour of the factory. The director explains to the guests that Francois and Bertrand are volunteers who testing the products. The next day, Christine says that she did not come to have dinner, but to get an explanation about participating in the gay parade. Francois slowly orders wine and dinner for himself, and then says that he is not going to give any explanations and if Christine does not want to communicate as equals, but came here with demands, then no one will detain her here. Francois comes to Jean-Pierre and shares the good news. He got rid of his wife's influence, and then takes out a grey cat from behind his back. Jean-Pierre smiles and hugs his little friend, but suddenly the men hear a squeak coming from the balcony. They open the door and see exactly the same second grey cat there. Later, the director calls Francois and asks is he gay or not. The director is confused. First these photos from the gay club, then Francois on the conveyor belt with Bernard. The accountant admits he is not gay and is prepared to take the punishment for lying, including being fired. The director thinks Francois is funny and his presence at the factory, whoever he is considered, has benefited the company, so of course he will not be punished. A year later, Francois and Bertrand arrive at work together. The factory team is gathered for the annual photo, and Francois again does not fit into the frame. To solve this problem, he pushes the people standing nearby, and 2 thugs who beat him up in the parking lot a year ago fall to the ground from the other end of the line.